a genogram, and that genogram allows you to track what goes on in your family. And what I've seen in the prison system is that when those women did that, a light clicked for them. And James Baldwin said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." So once they came face to face with that, they were able to make some differences.
All right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Vanessa Mahmoud. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been in practice for 42 years and worked in a number of settings, including, and working with children from age 6. I think the oldest person I've ever worked with was like 92. And worked with soldiers, with women who've been assaulted, children who were assaulted, really severe forms of trauma. And so that's my specialty in work with severe trauma. And be glad to talk with you about any questions you might have in that area.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I've been involved in all aspects of trauma. I've been working in this area, in this arena since 1982. At mental health aspect, forensic aspect, I've prepared children who were sexually abused for court and had to do play therapy with them for the trauma that they faced for the court system. Been involved with trauma from defects, from abusive families with foster care, individuals dealing with homelessness. Of course, I know my brother down the panel, he'll deal with veterans, but dealt with veterans and their experience with trauma. Dealt with individuals dealing with COVID, the trauma of losing their loved ones due to COVID, the trauma of those that were dealing with Katrina was like when I was working at Grady, and they were displaced and what they went through standing on the roofs, waiting to be picked up. Every aspect of trauma and how to deal with trauma I've dealt with throughout my 40-something years working with adults and children and teenagers. I'm a retired, so-called retired clinical social worker, but I have a nonprofit Muslima consultation group, and we've been dealing with trauma in that group through the years. You'd be surprised how much trauma the Islamic community is dealing with and has been dealing with. We've been in business for 25 years, and we came together as a group because of trauma the sisters were dealing with polygyny. And, that's a trauma for a lot of sisters, and that has to be dealt with. So yes, I'm not even going to get into all my credentials. I'm just a servant of Allah trying to help everybody that needs help. Alhamdulillah.
Assalamu alaikum. Oh. Are you talking to me? Oh, 1 minute. Okay. You took all the minutes. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Isla Samira Beya. I am a servant of Allah, and I work in a lot of different capacities. One of the titles that I call myself is a therapeutic healing coach, but my main objective has been substance abuse and all of its traumas and all of its family members over the last 30 years. Thank you.
That was great.
Yeah, that was good. That was 1 minute.
Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah, it's really good to be here. I am Sister Aisha. I am a certified integrative nutritionist, certified healthy lifestyle educator, and integrative life coach. And today I would like to bring my knowledge and expertise from the area of trauma, from dealing with it from a nutritional standpoint, teaching individuals how to detox trauma, not only nutritionally, but also emotionally. And so that is my background, and that is what I'm here to offer up. And alhamdulillah, I'm happy to see everyone.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Aisha Shah, and I am a certified Reiki master and intuitive empath. I use Reiki to address issues in the energy system, which can result from trauma and the symptoms that come from that, such as depression, anger issues, anxiety, and so on and so forth. I've seen significant healing within just a few sessions sometimes in my clients who they want to move past trauma but just find that they can't, and often that's because there's a block in the energy system that needs to be shifted.
Assalamu alaikum. I am Professor Jamila Franklin, and I created my own system with the help of Allah. I deal with emotional release. A lot of you are having trauma due to ancestral baggage and blockages. So I go into your ancestral patterns and I look at that. I've dealt with trauma on all levels, particularly with professional women and men, because a lot of times we are overlooked. People think we have it all together and we don't. So I'm looking at trauma at all levels. I'm a certified Reiki master, a certified aromatherapist, a certified metaphysician. I have a lot of different other things I have that I do. But thank you for the time.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Hamdan Danan. I'm with Veterans for Community Services. And our main goal is to assist veterans in obtaining the services that they need. Help for PTSD. We help them, refer them to homeless centers. Our primary agency that we do our referral to is the Veterans Administration. And mainly we do that because the VA has all the services that they need. They can get health care, especially if they don't have insurance. They have a homeless program. It's not that great, but they're working on it. They're improving it. They've actually decreased homelessness in the veterans population. So we serve as an agency. We also do counseling to people with PTSD and trauma and drug addiction. We can spend hours about the trauma and the problems they're going through with drug addiction. If we get a call and a veteran needs for us to listen to them, we'll spend hours with them because that individual needs help. A lot of times they say dial 911 if you seek an emergency. It doesn't work all the time. A person like that needs someone that understands what they're going through, and that's where we are. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Oene Davis. I've been a part of the community for some years, actually since '72. And my objective is, in short, is I have developed a new approach to mental health treatment. It's called monotheistic spiritual-based treatment. And I made my first presentation on this in Las Vegas in 2008. And at the very time I was to take the stage, I got the message that Imam Muhammad had passed. But I spoke on monotheistic spiritual-based treatment, which is a new paradigm. And the main reason I'm dealing with that is because there's only one truth that can end all trauma. That is Islam. And a lot of people do not know that Sigmund Freud, who is the top psychotherapist, William James, who was president of Harvard Divinity School, they both said the same thing. Even Oliver Cromwell said Great Britain could have been a greater country if, in fact, they had made Islam the national religion. But they didn't do it. Now we have a chance to do something. That's why I want to deal with everything. Because if you're not dealing with the truth of God, and He's the only one who made us, anything that goes counter to your nature causes trauma. And we need to begin to start understanding that from a wider perspective. So my objective is to develop mental health centers, community mental health centers across not only this country, but in the world, to replace these other false paradigms of treatment. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. I am a guest in the house, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be here as well. I feel like I am the student up here learning from such great teachers, and so I'm humbled to be a part of this really, really blessed panelists. My name is Matt Genius. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. My background is in black male wellness. I've worked in elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, prison systems, but where I come alive is dealing with the black man, primarily because I am a black man and I'm also a product of trauma. I grew up in South Florida in the city of Opelika, where there was, in the late 80s and 90s, what I'd say, and I'd cut it short by saying that I survived that time period, and the blessing was I came out as a therapist, and so the context of trauma is in my blood, but the context of healing is also inside of me as well, and so that's what I bring to the table this evening. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Y'all see can we give them a round of applause? We got the juice in the house. So thank you all so much for giving some background about your experience. Can someone, y'all can decide, can someone describe to me or give me a little bit more about what trauma actually is? What is trauma? We kind of throw this word around and we hear a lot about trauma-informed yoga, blah, blah, this, blah, blah, that. But what is trauma and what constitutes something as a trauma? You could just raise your hand. Not all at one time.
Well, if we look toward the clinical definition of what trauma is, and you're right that we do throw that word around a little bit too much, we're looking at some event that a person has experienced that in which they think they might die, and they're confronting death in some way. A child who has been raped sometimes thinks that this will never end. I might die as a result of it. A man who's in combat and who is having to kill people, you know, his life is right there. When somebody is addicted and you know, has been on the street and is facing danger every day, you know, death is at the bottom of it. The other thing about trauma is that it actually changes the individual's biology. It changes their brain. And once you encounter that kind of trauma, a lot of times people would say to me, I wish I could go back and be like I was. The reality is you will not ever be like you were. You can be better, but you will not be the same. And so the body actually learns some things from trauma and learns a certain set of defenses that we call post-traumatic stress disorder, which is really a defense against anything that's going to try to kill you. So it is adaptive. But you get stuck there sometimes. And what we're talking about when we're talking about healing is getting unstuck and grow beyond the trauma and to learn to thrive instead of just being on survival all the time. Okay.
So would anybody like to expound on what she said? Do we all agree?
When you talk about trauma, prolonged trauma eventually evolves into post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And PTSD is a debilitating disease as well. If it's not treated immediately, it can move over into drug addiction. Now, there are a lot of people that never experience trauma. And there are some people that experience trauma never become addicted. So there's another underlying factor for that group. But right now, what we're talking about are the people that become addicted based on exposure to trauma. One of the things that happen is that they're looking for relief. This is how addiction starts. Let me find something to get this out of my brain, out of my system, out of my body. So they turn to drugs or alcohol. The problem is, especially with drugs, when you take that first drug and you get that first high, that first euphoric feeling, you feel so good. That becomes your baseline for how you want to feel for the rest of your life. So you start looking for that high. You will never, ever get it again. And the next time you chase it, you got to take more drugs. And then the next time, more drugs, more drugs, more drugs. And before you know it, you're hooked. That individual needs help from a psychiatrist as well as drug abuse. So he has to have concurrent therapy, because treating PTSD and overlooking the drug problem is not going to work. Treating the drugs and overlooking the psychological problem is not going to work. Has to be a concurrent therapy treatment.
Sister Taryn, you wanted to share with us too?
Yes, I wanted to say that often the trauma is so deeply rooted and disturbing that the individual has buried it so deep in their subconscious, they don't really want to recall it. But what happens is there may be experiences in their life that triggers it, and it comes up again. And this really interferes with the quality of life on all levels, holistically. Emotional, mental, psychological, physical. It impacts them in a way that they cannot move on. They cannot understand why they can't have healthy relationships. They cannot understand why this marriage didn't work. They can't understand why they did not get along with their family members. And the other piece is that oftentimes family members also have been so traumatized to the point that they have also learned how to live with this trauma over time. Karan talked about a genogram. When we do family therapy, yes, you learn what has happened over time with the families. And in most cases, it's a learned behavior. They've learned how to live with trauma. But that doesn't mean that they have learned how to overcome and manage it and know how to heal from it. So I just wanted to add those two pieces.
Okay. So just for a reiteration too, the panel is meant to be also available for questions, not only in the audience, but from our Facebook Live as well. So if any of you have questions, please feel free to engage and raise your hand and we will call upon you.
My name is Isla Baya. Was I to go next?
Yes, please. Thank you.
My name is Isla Baya, and I want to piggyback on a little bit of what they all said about trauma. Sometimes trauma that happens in the early stages, like before 1 and 2, and it is also said that, well, they don't remember that, but sometimes they do. And their first drug of choice becomes fantasy, where they begin to fantasize that this is not happening, this is not real, and they may never, ever discuss it. You know, someone may call them, oh, she's promiscuous, or he's promiscuous, but he's seen stuff he shouldn't have seen, and he has been traumatized by it. And then it just develops into another thing, and they may not discover it till late in life when the onion that they're peeling of their souls, Allah guides them to that, and it stinks, and they begin to unpeel that.
I think one of the things we really need to look at when we began to start dealing with trauma, and that is, in the 90s, there was a lot of study that was done on mirror imaging of the brain. And what they found out is that everything in your body and everything you do is controlled by neurochemicals. And when there's a neurochemical imbalance, that's where all the problem starts. Because when Allah made you, he made you exactly as he intended to make you. And so you had balance in everything. But now when you begin to start getting those imbalances, then that means your body begins to start seeking whatever can replace those imbalances. And therefore, different drugs affect different people. And so we have to begin to start looking at this scientifically, because everything goes back to how Allah made man and how the world as it is has gone in such a way it is controverting the reality of man. and it goes to the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and all the rational perspective that we should be having as a normal human being.
I would just like to add, I'm sorry, a question? I would just like to add that trauma has many faces. And so I know we heard a definition earlier, but trauma has many faces. And sometimes we feel like our trauma isn't being validated because we didn't hear our stories being shared. And so here's one story of what trauma looks like. A study that was done by the CDC in Casa Permanente in 1994, 1995 was called the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. Some people may have heard of it on the panel. It's called ACEs. And in this study, they had over 17,000 individuals in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And when they got these individuals, they took them to their clinics and they did a full checkup on them, physical health. They found out all the things that were going wrong with them. And what they did was they correlated their adult health impacts back to their childhood trauma. And the childhood trauma they described were the traumatic experiences that happened primarily inside the home. And when I first heard this study, I was blown away because it was speaking about my childhood. And so what it talked about is that if you have a specific number of traumatic experiences inside your home, 4 or more is the correlation that was really set you over the edge. You have now been dealt a hand that allows you to then have less chances of living after a specific year. We have high levels of blood pressure. All these negative health effects are now something that you could potentially have based on your childhood traumatic experiences. But then the limitation of that study didn't talk about the community that we live in sometimes. Sometimes your neighbor could have the face of trauma based on what they're experiencing. Sometimes it's outside of your door. Growing up in Opelika, I mean, there was violence everywhere. Right? And so the trauma was being outside, not inside the home. And so trauma has many faces. It can have the face in a space where it's school. It could have the face of a family member. And so trauma has many faces. So remember that, and not to minimize what our experiences are and invalidate other experiences because those seem more traumatic. It's the shock that we receive that then sends the message, like the brother was saying, to our brains to release these chemicals, adrenaline and cortisol. High levels of that in a child isn't processed as it's developed. As a developed adult, we can process adrenaline and cortisol faster, and the remains then slows down the brain from developing, which then causes these issues later on in life.
All right, Sister Aisha, you wanted to share with us?
Real quick,
okay.
the Adon is going to be called in about 1 minute, so Professor Franklin, if you'll go ahead.
Mine is going to be. Okay, what everyone has said is really good. I go a little differently because a lot of trauma is caused in the womb. The mother who is carrying the child is experiencing trauma, and that's passed on to the child. And even before then, there's ancestral trauma. A lot of you are experiencing trauma from your ancestors that has not been processed. Because a lot of times people would say, I don't know why I did that. I don't know why I said that. And it's not because I'm a therapist too and I've taught psychology. It's not in the pre-cortex or any of that. It's energetic. So I look at the energy that's involved with the formation of the child. So I deal with energy medicine, and my practice deals strictly with energy because that to me is the core, is the beginning and the end for a lot of this.
So what I would like to suggest, the Adon is about to be called. When we stop to pray, everybody, we've gotten some great information. This is just the beginning. But think about, process in your, when I say think about, this other heart right here, when you pray, think about what some of your traumas have been so that when we come back to complete the panel discussion, we can really get what we're supposed to get, the medicine that we're supposed to get from it. And it might be different for all of us, but really process through that and think about, because what happens is a lot of times we don't even know when we're creating a trauma for somebody else. What trauma have I created for my child? I look at something, I'm like, that might have been me. Seriously. And for us to really like reflect from our heart, what part did I play in my own, in my children's, in who played a part in my trauma? And somebody told me I'm just like my great granddaddy. I ain't even met him. So let's think from here while we pray, and then we're going to come right back to the good stuff. Okay.
أول شيء كان جيني بسم الله الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا